Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Breath Talks. And it is with great pleasure today that I have Nathalia Westmacott with me, who is a wonderful old friend that we actually met sitting next to each other at the LRT in Glastonbury
True.
years ago.
Yeah.
And Nathalia has been a driving force in breathwork in the UK for a couple of decades now. You started off, didn't you, with Christina Artemis? But I just also want to briefly mention that Nathalia was, and now still is, highly involved with the International Breathwork Foundation. Nathalia organized Wales and India JICs.
Yeah, so
And
true.
you're back on the team now, aren't you?
Yeah, I can't seem to leave it alone. I have a fascination with breathwork worldwide. It just and also just uniting communities. I think there's something fundamental about breathing, bringing the different disparate parts of ourselves together. And I think there's something that's in the internal world that's also in the external world. And I seem to have a voracious appetite for bringing breath workers together, regardless of their creed or their practices. Like we've all got a lot of modalities, and that's diversified all the time. But we are all breathing humans, and I feel very enthusiastic about creating platforms for people to be able to meet and exchange.
Yes.
Yeah.
And how was your journey? How did you get into it and how did it progress?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, I feel like the breath finds you, doesn't it? I wasn't looking for the breath, but I think the breath was probably looking for me. And I had in my previous life, I was working as a professional in film production. And I thought that was my whole career forever. I just thought, this is it. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to make movies, and that was that. And then through a series of circumstance, really, I wasn't in balance within myself. I did not have a sense of the inner world. I hadn't really a spiritual framework. And therefore, I was kind of holding a lot of pressure in my work, which didn't really have any way of being grounded in a healthy way. And so all of that resulted in some fairly problematic addictions, drinking, obviously, alcohol, a bit of drug use, and so on. And ultimately, that was unsustainable. So my response to that was to move to the seaside. I thought, I'll go to the sea and see if I can sort myself out. And that's where I met Christina. And Christina, really, that's a date with destiny. She's a I was not immediately persuaded by breathwork. I was quite skeptical. I was inclined towards understanding the world through my mind. It all seemed a bit odd, even just at a basic level of lying down on a mattress on the ground in the living room of some woman I've never met before. I just found that all a little bit much. I was like, this is bizarre. And so I didn't actually partake in the breathwork for some time. And then eventually I sort of thought, oh, you've got to drink the medicine you're selling here. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Having these lengthy conversations about the benefit of breathwork on the telephone and thinking, well, hang on a minute, like at some point you've got to sort of suck it and see. So yeah, so I got down on the mat, and it was literally from the first breathe. It was an extraordinary. I happened to surface something which felt like a pre-incarnation experience of how it felt before I came into my body, and that was a paradigm shift, because of course I was really not running a spiritual framework at that time. So I didn't really. So I was like, how can I have experienced myself prior to my birth? How can I have had a completely clear sort of meeting with myself? It threw everything into question. It was like, the world is not as I thought it to be. And this has been a wonderful fragmentation of my understanding of life has been going on ever since. Really, I've had the benefit of everything melting beautifully, and that's what the breath does, isn't it? It's sort of like defragments the hard drive. Yeah, so that's how I started, and we worked together very happily for about 3 years full time. So that was a really traditional apprenticeship, just going everywhere with her, doing everything. I sort of stalked her for 3 years basically, and then I came out of that as a practicing practitioner.
And you know what, you know, that there is an absolute value to that, because it doesn't happen as much now.
This is true, yeah.
Yeah, I traveled with Leonard all over.
Yeah.
And the experience of doing the training over and over again and facilitating and teaching.
Yeah, I've actually, the way that I teach now follows that model, because it was so beneficial to me. And you can't, at the same time I came out of 3 years with Christina, I realized that I needed to broaden my palette, and so I moved out of that into a school at that time in the UK called InBreath, that was run by Heinz Gerd Langer and Jana Kondo, and then I did a year or two with those guys learning group facilitation technique, and that was awesome, because they were identifying themselves as integrative breath therapists. They weren't identifying as rebirthers. So it started this shift, this modality shift, which has been going on ever since. It's like a glacial shift that moves through me. The traditional apprenticeship, that model applies to my training program now. And the reason that I think it's successful is because I used to hothouse people in, you know, maybe in the first place in a year. Like I don't know how I did it now. I have no idea how we didn't go psychotic, but we do like 40 days of training in a year. What I've found is until the 3rd year, the experience of the content doesn't become embodied at a cellular level. It sort of seems to move from being cerebral, conceptual, and you can have a really good grasp, an intellectual grasp, and you can be like, wow, I love this work, and this is what it is, and I've read The Power of Now, and one thing and another, and it all makes sense. Yes. Yeah. And it's got this level of, it's not congruent, because you can talk about it, so it's arrived in your throat. It's not until you start really feeling it in the body, once it starts going into the sort of lower energy centers, that you start going, I feel really passionate about this. Like I understand it, I can articulate it, and I get what it does in the body. And then as it drops down into the solar plexus, I have the willpower to actually share this. Into the sacral, it starts grounding into a sensitivity, which is super important. This is where integrity sits, like in the heart and the sacral. Integrity, so it's not so hard-edged as it is when it's a mental concept. It starts to soften a little in the sacral, and then when it's in the base, you're really in the sort of manifestation phase, where it's like, I can do this, I can get out there and I can grow this, and I'm growing it through my own body, and therefore it's inevitable that it should be flowering in the world. And so we're not having a hard time creating practitioners, because by year 3 they're all in a practice already, and they've got their website, and they've got their publicity and their promotion, and they've got the support of the community to create that. Because what I witnessed in the past was there were a lot of people going through training programs, but there weren't actually that many people in the field. You know, 1 year after qualifying, a lot of people weren't practicing at all. Some people just qualified and didn't practice. And it's a lot of effort to go to, notwithstanding the value of a personal journey. You know, personal transformation has its own value. But I want to see people in practice providing a really solid service for years. You know, if they wish to, for years, growing into, you know, I never could have believed I'd still be doing this 23 years later. I mean, I never could have believed that. But this is the fruit tree that just keeps providing more and more and more bountiful fruit as time goes on. You know, like I'm as excited about the healing potential for breath now as I ever was. I mean, way excited, but much more so actually, because, you know, we didn't have the same access to information around embodiment in those days. This is quite new, you know, like the whole wave of information which is arriving around how to handle the trauma responses of the body, that's relatively recent, you know. So it's just getting more grounded. It's getting more exciting, I think, as time goes on.
And it took you on a big journey to California, and on the heart, was it sacral integration?
pelvic heart integration.
Pelvic.
Yeah, PHI. That's the work of Jack Painter and then subsequently Deborah Anapol, who was my teacher, just shortly before she passed away. So I had I was on the practitioner training there with Deborah, and learning the importance of the lower energy centers, really learning the importance of grounding it in the pelvis and the jaw. So this was never a traditional part of the rebirthing model. We were sort of like very much about the breath, about the breath, about the breath. Breath will move the body. But actually what I recognized early on was many people are so armored and calcified in the body that you need to breathe a long time before you start to really melt that down, you know. And even the application of relatively basic acupressure techniques make an enormous acceleration of what people can assimilate through the body. So I started to apply simple bodywork technique to breathwork sessions relatively early on, and that immediately took me a little bit out of the pathway of being a traditional. I don't think it's fair to say I've ever been a traditional rebirther. I think I was taught traditionally, and I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for this kind of quite pure foundation, because from a clean understanding of the breath, you can diversify. And I still say to people now, please learn to run sessions without the add-ons. Learn to run sessions where you really do truly trust the energetic self-healing capabilities of the body. Our body is basically fundamentally designed to self-heal. They're designed to self-regulate under the right conditions.
Yes.
And that in its purest sense is what the rebirthing, I think, was doing. Is it was saying, if we're safe, if we're secure, and if we're in a high vibrational atmosphere, i.e. we're holding progressive thoughts about ourselves and the world around us, and we feel supported by somebody who's got the experience to do that, then the body will start to click into self-healing. And this is the beauty of it, is actually quite simple. There's not a lot of doing needs to be done in those conditions.
Exactly.
So yeah, PHI was important. PHI also is a very, very direct method for working with sexual energy in the body. And it's not a tantric process. It's not about how to get yourself a sexual partner. It's about how to circulate your own life force energy in the body in a way which is dynamic. And right in the middle of PHI is a 4-part breath process, which is an extremely useful way to, and again, it just took me away from the, I don't know, like there's a simplicity to mouth breathing and nose breathing. The conscious connected breath, the advantage of it is it's accessible because it's simple. A lot of people moving away from mouth breathing these days, a lot of people saying you can get everything you need from in and out through the nose. Actually, as time's gone on, I've started to diversify the method, breathwork. I'm influenced by the 5-element breath process, which is probably got 2,000 or 3,000 years worth of roots down into the Chinese or Tibetan, techniques. It's a yogic practice, and 5 elements adds. This is the big thou shalt not in rebirthing. Thou shalt not mix nose and mouth. Yeah, so we'll go.
Oh no, it's not. It's a bit more relaxed now.
Oh, is that right? Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, you go to the mouth if you can't use the nose. If you can't get into your emotions. Yeah.
So there's always been a place for mouth breathing. Continual mouth breathing. And usually as a sort of like a more integrative breath, the continual nose breathing. And this is a traditional sort of approach. What I have been experimenting with in the last few years is when you add the fire breath from the 5 elements, that's in through the mouth, through the nose. You move the energy up the body in a way which is kind of really dynamic. There are different dimensions to the process, and I think that the water breath, which is in through the nose, out through the mouth, has a potential for cultivating surrender on a very, very deep level as well. So the 5-element process obviously brings in your earth energy, your air energy, your fire, your water, and your etheric. And etheric would probably correspond in terms of rebirthing with the noiseless energy breathing. Where you go into that very, very subtle sipping of the breath. When these processes are sort of run together in a cycle, in a whole breath cycle, it's really quite interesting to see what happens. So that's what I'm experimenting with these days.
Fantastic. And I met you again while you were writing your book that was published. So if you wanted to show everybody
the little book of self-care. So that this was a fortuitous opportunity. It was Claire Gabriel from the British Rebirth Society who offered me this opportunity. She was actually initially engaged as the writer of this book and circumstantially wasn't able to do that. So I stepped into the smoking shoes, and the concept had already been agreed by Penguin, by DK Publishers. They said that what we would like is, I think they said something like 50 or 60 breath exercises to address everyday ailments. I was like, 50 or 60. It's prompted me to read more deeply into Qigong, read into pranayama. And of course, pranayama sits as the foundation of rebirthing. And then the beauty of it is the proposal was to essentially tell the story in relatively brief, well, very brief. You know, this is a whole breath process. And it just provides you a little bit of information on the posture. I'm also incredibly enthusiastic about postural realignment. This is one of the features of I think it's essential to have postural awareness. You're going to open up the system to more energy, and the skeletal system is central to that. So pelvic heart was useful for that. Before breath, grounded in the body. And traditional meditation is all about that, isn't it? Is your Zen meditation says sit, you know, in a particular pose and hold the pose and now open up the energy, sort of thing. And I think this is really, really valuable. So yeah, so the book was written in 3 months. That was pretty intense. You know, it does what it set out to do, which is to open up people's curiosity around why breathing is more interesting than just this semi-automatic process, and how you can consciously direct breath to a whole variety. This is lovely, processing sexual energy, and that one's very motivated by tantric breathwork practice. So there's probably about 12 or 14 different modalities in there with various different methods. And it's for sale. It's still for sale, I think, amusingly, in petrol stations in the UK. I mean, it's in bookshops and it's on Amazon, right? But the place, yes, when you go to service stations and they've got like a WH Smith and there's like a little stand. This book is always there, and so I have this fantasy that somewhere there's truck drivers, you know, like waiting for the lactometer to. There's truck drivers somewhere going, oh, I have no idea. Combat and fatigue, that could be useful for me, you know. So keeping Britain trucking with the little breathwork. Quite pleased with that. A very modest start to my writing career, but still, I'm pleased to have done it.
Now, Nathalia, you've always been instrumental in community and the breathwork community, and you started up breathingcircle.com and encouraging people who are capable of facilitating breath circles to hold monthly breathing circles. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, thanks for asking. It's been one of my breath babies over the years. Breathing Circle was initially created as a way of establishing some breath aware community in a town that I just moved to. I had moved to a town and then shortly thereafter had a baby, which can be quite isolating in some ways. And so I had very little time on my hands, but I felt like I wanted to I didn't want to live in a town that didn't have any breathers in it, to be absolutely honest with you. I'd been spoiled for choice. I'd been in Bournemouth for years. There were so many people in that area that you could go to a breathe, you know, or you could, you know, and so Breathing Circle in the first place was an open invitation for people in my local area to come and learn a bit about breathwork. And then I felt like I had 3 hours a month that I could offer on a stable basis, you know, rather than overexerting. I wasn't doing client work with the baby and so on. So So I picked arbitrarily, I had Tuesday night off with my husband taking the baby. So I said, it'll be Tuesday, the last Tuesday of the month. And on the last Tuesday, we'll get together and we'll, 2 or 3 hour session, group breathe at the end of it. And that was the vision. And then some of the breath workers that I'd known in Bournemouth said, hey, we'll breathe with you. And Brigitte Martin Powell was one of the first started.
Right.
And she said, I'll breathe with you. And she started a circle on the last Tuesday. And then someone in Bournemouth started one. And then someone else, Julianne Horrocks, she was one of the first. And then it just sort of blossomed like the sort of apple blossom on a tree. And then somebody else said, I'll do it. And of course, I was in the IBF for 9 years. So I knew a lot of people internationally. So, and I think it's gone a little bit quiet for me since COVID. It was partly COVID, and it was also the breathwork training that I'm offering to practitioners really needed time and space. And so breath circle just went a little bit on the quiet side. But I think that the life's coming back into it. I've just been to the Global Inspiration Conference, and then they kind of give me some space to talk about it. And then people said, oh, we want to do that. And I was like, oh, okay. The breathing circle is having a rebirth, which is amazing.
Brilliant. I mean, it is so good for the community. Yeah, it's fantastic you're getting back into it. And also, you've been cocooning for a while as well, ready to re-emerge.
Yeah, I mean, growth is such a curious process, isn't it? I remember when I first started working with Jane Kondo at InBreath, and she told me that she was a woman of a similar age, I suppose, and she said she'd been practicing conscious breathing for 10 years. And I remember this having a huge effect on me. I was like, oh my God, your life must just be like on track, like 10 years of conscious breathing. I could only begin to imagine. My life was still very chaotic at that stage. And then obviously time goes by, and at the 10-year mark, I was sort of thinking, gosh, I don't feel quite as fully realized as I might. 10 years of breath work had seemed to have cleared the windows so I could see the shit more clearly, you know. I've got a better view of my crap, you know, than ever I did, you know.
Exactly.
And then,
Me too.
At that time, actually, that was around the time that I bought the Greenery, which is this piece of land, 4 acres of land just on the edge of the Cotswolds in the heart of England. And my vision for the Greenery was that there would be a physical base camp where people could physically come to a place, not a venue that's continually turning over participation, but a home for breath. And a home for self-healing in whatever shape it needs to take. Different people need different medicine. And so what started to happen was that the Greenery started to rebirth me from the feet up, you know, as I started to learn to live in rhythm with nature, because I don't live exactly off grid. You can tell I've got a gift of electricity. I'm very grateful for that. I'm not actually living with the candles most of the time, but yeah, I'm not off grid. I don't quite know how people do that, but I am living what you could probably call a low impact lifestyle. What I didn't realize was actually it was the land that was healing me rather than me doing healing on the land. And this was quite humbling.
And many people have come and stayed with you for healing, whether they realized it or not. And this is what I do love about the synchronicity with that. And that was Leonard did that. He had a training center, and people would come and stay and participate and heal.
Yeah.
And you're doing exactly the same.
Yeah, there's something astonishingly simple about it. And you see, I think in the past we understood the meaning of the word sanctuary, and I think that when people in the past, I mean, it's easy to have rose tinted spectacles. Plenty of things didn't work very well in the past, but I saw this program many years ago about how there was a institution in the countryside in France for people who were having mental health issues, and it was viewed as a sanctuary. It was named a sanctuary, and it provided exactly that. It provided a safe space for refuge. And they were comparing that to the medical model, where we feel like we have to do something to put someone right because there's something wrong with them. And I gradually started to sort of align myself to this notion of refuge and retreat and sanctuary, and the benefit of just getting away from the day-to-day for a period of time in order for the body to self-regulate. And I noticed it starts to happen with people who spend any extended period of time here. I've had contractors come in over the years, you know, to sort of plaster buildings. And then I've on more than one occasion, I'll walk in on some young man trying to get about his business of painting or something and crying. And then I'm like, well, can I help? What appears to be going on? And my wife's left me and one thing and another. But the emotions are surfacing. And so they're just plastering the ceiling and crying and I wish I won't forget that, you know. And there's big burly blokes that are not inclined towards, you know, coming for a therapeutic session, and yet the therapeutic energy is moving through. And it opens an opportunity for you to normalize feeling and to normalize emotionality and to make having feelings be okay. Because I think for a lot of people, and I recognize this is how I was raised, you know, feelings weren't really certainly celebrated, and certainly not difficult feelings. I mean, you know, it's okay if you're happy, but you know, keep the difficult stuff to yourself. And of course, that's the route to illness. It's the route to suicide. It's the route to relationship dysfunction. We all know. So how to reach people who are not yet in a place where they're going to say yes to a leaflet advertising breathwork? Well, you have to have an environment which is dedicated to healing. And I think that the land needs to want that. I think this land wanted it. I think the land wanted me in. I can't see the land. I did not have the means to pay for it. I was really in my, you know, my life was really in a very weird place, but I came here and I just got this really simple realization. As soon as I walked in, I was like, oh, this is it. This is where I'm going to be for a while. I'm going to be here. And everyone thought I'd lost my mind because they were like, you've got a little baby. Are you going to live on your own? It's an absolute honor to have people come and stay here. And it's, you know, mainly in the form of intensive retreats at the moment, because I'm training practitioners, and so yes, every other month we have a 5-day immersion. You know, waking up with the dawn. You know, the dawn fire ceremony. Of course, that was another feature of Leonard's work, which he influenced me. You know, everything that we have, we received from somewhere. It's worth remembering. It's like it's such, you know, the more of the work I do, the more I realize I was gifted a lineage through Christina that came to Leonard, that came from Babaji, that came from the Himalaya. We then went back to the Himalaya. We had the global
that was incredible, that Jick. It was absolutely amazing.
To go back to one of the places on the earth, not the only place. There's indigenous cultures everywhere that have been using amazing healing methods, you know, but certainly one of the core, the tap roots of the rebirthing was pranayama. And so to go back to the Himalaya and to have that experience was really special. It felt like something had come full circle, and to go to the ashram, the Babaji ashram, and so on. It's important.
So is your website still first-breath.co.uk?
It is, yeah, first-breath.co.uk. That's the one. Yeah, it's undergoing a rebirth itself at the moment.
Yeah.
Because
are you starting a new cycle of trainings coming up?
Yeah, I mean, I'm basically running a 3-year practitioner training program, which people can take on a year-by-year basis. So I'm not kind of, I think you're such a different person after 1 year on the program that's the point at which you can make a decision about who you are now. You know, like people, sometimes people show up and they're like, yeah, I want the 3-year program. I'm like, you have no idea. We don't know who you be in December. So let's just hold off the decision making. But they sort of re-up at the end of the year. Then you can have an integration of what's happened happened. And then if you decide to go further, then after 1 year on the program, then you start to sort of like enter into now what I've received for myself, I'd like to learn to provide that to others. And I'm not yet really in the world of teaching online. I know some good work's going on in that place, but I'm such an embodiment freak. I'm all about the body, and I'm all about learning to work with the various sort of defenses and calcifications that go on in the body. And you know, I don't want to diminish what anyone else is offering online, but for me, it's love is one of the biggest healing agents we have available to us.
It is, and that is the core.
Yeah.
And that's on my own healing journey. Love heals.
Yes, 100%. It makes you sound like you've gone crazy and you're a mad hippie, but really, if there's an authentic atmosphere of love and safety, then you know the magic doesn't really work, and it becomes a kind of a cerebral, you know, intellectual. Even intellectual, emotional, actually, I would say. But you know, it's when you truly feel loved, you recognize that you're worthy of recovery. And interestingly, I live just south of Birmingham, so I do quite a lot of client work with people who are actually in recovery, you know, drug addiction and so on. I've walked that path myself, so I've been able to provide some degree of support to people with those challenges. And what I've learned over the years is you don't fight the dragon. You don't go in and have a fight with cocaine. Don't go and have a fight with alcohol. What's the point? You're lending your energy to what you're not wanting. However, when people feel secure enough, you know, just here in this little chalet in the trees, this is just a little hideaway that no one can hear you here. This is a safe place to express whatever needs to come out. And then when the emotional suppression is addressed, then of course the urge to be using diminishes. It stands to reason. There's less to hold down. I would say to people, it's like you're trying to hold a beach ball down under the swimming pool, you know, and it's exhausting. It's like, how do I keep the ball down? How do I keep the ball down? You know, and it's like, well, actually, what if you just don't keep the ball down? Just let it go, you know, and then when it's gone, you can relax and enjoy your life, you know. And it's like, oh, why am I not stressed anymore? Because you're not trying to hold all this stuff down, you know. It's obvious, isn't it?
So when I was a child, I'd often come out of my body and think, who am I? What am I doing here? And so this leads me to my last question is, what do you think this reality, this existence is all about?
Oh, the big one, the big question. We have to take a breath before we respond to that question. That question without breath. Yeah, it's interesting you should say about being a child, because probably one of the most, I don't know, influential earlier memories that I have of being a child in Indonesia. I was raised in Indonesia, and I probably have been about 4 years old. And there was a moment where my dad was a geologist, and he would take us out to geological sites he wanted to excavate, and he'd be tapping away with his hammer somewhere in the sunshine. And me and my two sisters would just be sitting around playing in the dirt, you know, what you do for hours while somebody digs rocks out the ground, you know. This moment that where I turned my body backwards and sat down on a volcanic rock, on a boulder of sorts. And in the moment where my body touched the rock, I had you called it an out of body. I did not know that, but I sat on the rock and I had this incredible sense of what the words that went through my head were, why here now? And in the moment of why here now, everything seemed to be available. Everything in existence seemed to be available. Not that I would have had the sophistication of that thought, but it was like, I am a part of everything, and everything is a part of me. So why here now? And I was probably 4 or 5 years old. I mean, that, like, not really even speaking that much. So that came back to me when I started breathwork. That moment of why here now. And my sense is that this is a tremendous, elegant, holographic experience. Every part is in every other part, you know, and just to have the exceptional privilege of being able to be in this is a gift in its own right, but able to be conscious within it. And I don't mean that obnoxiously, like, oh, I'm so conscious, you know, like we can all be variously conscious and ongoing journey, but to be able to experience the experience with awareness, and to be able to in some small way influence the experience with your intention, that is a magnificent opportunity, which I just feel so deeply touched by. And so even on in the difficult moments, you know, and there are some, you know, like we have things going on around here from time to time that just leave me on my knees, you know, and kind of heartbroken, you know, so things happen, you know, however, even the misery and the suffering is a part of a tremendously elegant experience, which is ever expanding.
It is
exciting.
And that was my understanding from the left-hand path of Tantra, is that we actually have come here to experience the misery.
And is it misery? And, you know, like,
yeah,
the true alchemy is to stay with things for long enough for them to change.
Yeah.
And earlier this year, I think you probably know this, and my spirit animal Loki, who was my Loki. The 2 weeks after I moved here, this little white dog appeared, and he's been by my side ever since. And he passed over the 16th of January, and that experience was, I can't even explain, you know. There's a special department in your heart for the dogs, and some other thing goes on around that. It was like losing my best friend, really. And I say losing, but, you know, losing him in his body, really, you know. For about 2 months, I just went into kind of more or less a reclusive space. I just didn't really feel like I wanted to be in anyone's world. I just didn't. I just wanted to be with myself. And I guess this is a, you know, basic grieving cycle or whatever. And now, a few months on, watching my relationship with that part of myself change and grow is, I'm back in love with the body. The body is so adept at surfacing and integrating and surfacing and integrating. It's just such a wonderful design. So yes, I'm not sad about the sadness.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Nathalia. It's been an absolute joy speaking with you again. And everyone have a look at Nathalia's website.
When you go to firstbreath.co.uk, that will not just be my story, I hope. I hope you're also going to be able to meet a few of the folks that I've had the privilege to be teaching and growing with the last few years. Yeah.
Fantastic.
And thank you for the invitation. It's really fantastic to see you again with your Northern Lights. Yeah, just amazing. Amazing. My heart feels so full. It just feels like, there's love everywhere. There's love everywhere.